In this video, let's take a look at creating some guide curves for our lofted surfaces. First, we're going to take a look at Surface Loft 3. This loft was created by using 3 sketches, Sketch 2 on the front plane, Sketch 3 on our off-axis plane 3, and Sketch 4 that's located on plane 2. Let's go ahead and start a new sketch on the right plane and create a single guide curve. I'm going to leave Surface Loft 3 intact and create a new surface so we can see the differences between the two. So because of that, I want to use my Convert Entities drop-down intersection curve option to take a look at the curvature that's already on our completed surface. I'm going to convert that to construction and just use it as a reference. So we're going to create a spline going from our start to our end, but we're going to have to add a midpoint in there. And the reason we need to add a midpoint is because this curve needs to intersect all of our profiles. So if we show sketch 3, we need to make sure that we pierce this sketch. So now that we've pierced that sketch, we can go ahead and tweak our geometry. Now you'll notice that the dashed line is the current shape. So let's say we want to tweak this a little bit to come into our ending profile at a little bit steeper angle. But you'll notice that we're dropping below the original shape up here. So let's say we wanted to modify that as well and be a little bit closer to that shape. So now let's hide the surface. We're going to show sketch 2 and sketch 4. And let's create our new loft. So again, we're going to select the sections that we want to go to. Make sure that we don't have any twist. Select guide curves and add our guide curve in there. So let's take a look at what we have. Let's change the color of this surface to something that's a little bit easier to see, like a red. And then let's turn on Surface Loft 3. So you'll notice instantly that there's quite a bit of a difference between the surfaces. Even though we're using the same start, end, and mid profiles, just having that single guide curve can have a drastic effect on how the surface is carried out. You'll notice that it's coming into the end curve at a very steep angle on this one side, closer to our guide curve, but over here it's still closer to the original loft. So this is important to note because when you're creating these guide curves, you need to understand how it's going to be affecting your geometry. Let's hide Surface Loft 3 and Surface Loft 5 and show Surface Loft 4. Now this was the one that was created with our 3D sketch. Let's go ahead and edit the 3D sketch and let's add a few guide curves. Doing them all in a single 3D sketch can often be a little bit easier to handle, especially if you're sketching on plane. So let's go ahead and just add splines by selecting the endpoints of our line. Let's add a spline at the midpoints. And then let's add one more guide curve, just snapping to our line. All right, we're going to view this from the top side. We're going to modify how our guide curves are exiting that first profile. We want to make sure they all stay fairly similar, but tweak the geometry. Now let's take a look at it from the side and look at how all these curves are exiting. We can modify this geometry as well to make sure that we're getting the appropriate geometry that we want. All right, now that we've created all these guide curves, let's go ahead and take a look at creating a new surface. We're going to hide Surface Loft 4 and create a new lofted surface. Because we are dealing with a 3D sketch for all of our profiles and our guide curves, we're going to have to make multiple selections using the Selection Manager. So this is the original surface that we created. So now let's go ahead and add some guide curves. You can instantly see how this is changing our profile. Once we've added all the guide curves, we can select OK, hide our 3D sketch, and take a look at what we've created. You can see that having two guide curves relatively close to each other and in 3D space, not on a plane where it's a little bit easier to control the geometry, has created a little bit of a ripple in our surface. Let's change the color of this surface to something that's a little bit easier to see, like blue. And then let's turn on Loft 4. So again, you can see that using the same profiles but adding the guide curves had a drastic effect on the shape of the surface. So it's very important to take the time when you're defining your guide curves and your profiles to make sure you understand how the geometry is going to unfold. It's always nice to create this geometry with standard dimensions, but a lot of times, especially dealing with complex surfaces, you can't do that. So using the splines and using your tools to your advantage is going to be very important, but a lot of times leaving them underdefined until you've completely created the surface can be a handy tool to go back and tweak them. We can always go back and do things like edit the loft and remove one of our guide curves and see how that changes our surface. So as you can see, that immediately limited the amount of ripple that was created. This is another important note to not over-define your surfaces. Use as few guide curves and profiles as possible to get the geometry that you want.